When my son stopped calling me, I didn't understand why. For weeks I stared at my phone, waiting for his name to appear on the screen. But it never did. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, searching for the moment I'd done something wrong. I couldn't find it. The silence between us felt like a wall I couldn't see through. And behind that wall, someone was whispering. Someone was telling him things about me that weren't true. It took me a long time to realize who that someone was. My daughter-in-law. The woman I'd welcomed into our family with open arms. The woman I'd called my daughter. She didn't shout or fight with me. She didn't need to. Her weapon was softer than that. She whispered. And those whispers changed everything. But here's what Rebecca didn't know. Here's what she couldn't have predicted. I wasn't just a broken-hearted mother who would fade quietly into the background. I wasn't going to accept being erased from my son's life. No, I was going to fight back. Not with screaming. Not with confrontation. But with something far more powerful. The truth. Carefully revealed. Strategically exposed. One whisper at a time. You see, Rebecca thought she was clever. She thought her manipulation was invisible. She thought she could control Daniel forever, keeping me at arm's length while she built her perfect little world. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated a mother's love. And more importantly, she underestimated a mother's patience. Because while she was busy whispering lies, I was watching, learning, documenting, preparing. I remember the last time I heard my son's voice clearly. It was warm. He called me Mom the way he always did, with that little smile in his tone. He told me he loved me. He promised we'd have dinner that weekend. But that dinner never happened. The weekend came and went. No call. No message. Just silence. And that's when I knew. That's when I decided. If Rebecca wanted to play games, I would play too. But I would play smarter. I would play longer. And I would win. This isn't a story about forgiveness. This isn't a story about turning the other cheek. This is a story about justice. About a mother who refused to be defeated. About a woman who took back what was stolen from her. Piece by piece, truth by truth. Some might call it revenge. Call it restoration. I call it revealing the real Rebecca to everyone who mattered. To Daniel. To her family. To her friends. To the world she'd so carefully constructed around her lies. I've always believed that a mother's love is unbreakable. That no matter what happens, no matter how far your children go, that invisible thread connecting you stays strong. I raised my son alone after my husband died. I poured everything I had into him. Every ounce of strength. Every moment of time. Every piece of my heart. And when Rebecca tried to sever that connection, when she tried to erase me, she didn't realize she was starting a war she couldn't win. This is the story of how I lost my son. And how I destroyed the woman who took him from me. Not with violence. Not with obvious cruelty. But with something far more devastating. The systematic dismantling of her carefully crafted lies. The patient exposure of her true nature. The quiet revelation of every manipulation. Every whisper. Every calculated move she'd made. And by the time I was done, Rebecca would wish she'd never heard my name. She would wish she'd never tried to turn my son against me. Because a mother's love, when twisted into determination, is the most powerful force on earth. Let me tell you how it began. And how it ended. For her. My name is Eleanor Carter. I'm 62 years old. I live alone now in the same house where I raised my son Daniel. It's a modest 3-bedroom home on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The neighborhood hasn't changed much over the years. The same families still live here. But I've changed. Oh, how I've changed. The woman I was before Rebecca came into our lives, that trusting, open-hearted mother, she's gone. In her place stands someone harder, smarter, more calculating. Someone who learned that sometimes, kindness is mistaken for weakness. And I was done being weak. His father, Thomas, passed away when Daniel was only 7 years old. A heart attack. Sudden and brutal. One day he was here laughing at the breakfast table, and the next day he was gone. I became both mother and father to that little boy. I worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, I was a receptionist at a dental office. At night, I cleaned office buildings downtown. I sacrificed everything for Daniel. everything. And that's why, when Rebecca tried to take him from me, I knew I had to fight back. Not just for me. For all those years. For all that sacrifice. For Thomas, who wasn't here to protect our son from a manipulator. Daniel grew up to be a kind man. Maybe too kind. That was his weakness. He saw the best in people. He trusted easily. And Rebecca exploited that. She knew exactly what she was doing from the moment she met him. I see that now. At the time I thought she was sweet. Polite. I thought she loved my son. But love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't destroy relationships to maintain control. When Daniel told me he wanted to marry her, I cried tears of joy. Tears I now regret. Because I was celebrating my own destruction. I was welcoming my enemy into the family with open arms. But I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know that behind that sweet smile was a calculating mind that saw me as a threat, as competition, as something to be eliminated. The first time I met Rebecca was on a Saturday afternoon in early spring. Daniel brought her home for lunch. I spent the entire morning preparing. I wanted everything to be perfect. When the doorbell rang, my heart raced. I opened the door. There she was. Rebecca. Beautiful. Long dark hair. Bright hazel eyes. A warm smile that I now know was completely fake. She held a bouquet of tulips. "Mrs. Carter," she said. "It's so lovely to meet you. Daniel's told me so much about you." I took the flowers. I invited her in. And I played the perfect hostess. But looking back now, I remember things I didn't notice then. The way her eyes scanned the house, cataloging everything. The way she asked questions that seemed innocent but were actually gathering information. "Does Daniel come here often? Do you two talk every day? Are you very close?" She was assessing, planning, figuring out how much of a problem I would be. That afternoon she was charming. She laughed at my stories. She complimented my cooking. But now I realize she was performing. Every smile was calculated. Every word was chosen carefully. She was studying Daniel's reactions, learning what made him happy, what made him feel guilty, what buttons she could push later. Rebecca was playing chess while I was playing checkers. But not anymore. Now I know the game. And I'm better at it than she ever was. Over the next few months I saw them regularly. Sunday lunches. Holiday dinners. And every time Rebecca was sweet. Kind. She brought gifts. She hugged me. She called me Eleanor in that soft voice. And all the while she was planting seeds. Little comments. Tiny suggestions. "Your mom seems lonely, doesn't she? Do you think she's too dependent on you? Maybe we should give her some space to make her own friends." I didn't hear these conversations. But Daniel told me about them later. Much later. When it was almost too late. When Daniel proposed, I was thrilled. I gave my blessing. I helped plan the wedding. I went dress shopping with Rebecca and her mother. And the whole time Rebecca was playing her role perfectly. The loving future daughter-in-law. The grateful bride-to-be. The woman who respected and appreciated me. But it was all an act. Every single moment. The wedding was beautiful. I cried during the ceremony. I cried because I thought I was gaining a daughter. I didn't know I was losing a son. After the wedding, they moved into an apartment across town. 20 minutes away. Close enough that I could visit. Or so I thought. Because within weeks, Rebecca's true plan began to unfold. And I was powerless to stop it. First, the change was gradual. So gradual I almost didn't notice. Daniel's calls became less frequent. His visits became rare. There was always an excuse. Always a reason. And behind every excuse was Rebecca, whispering, controlling, isolating. She was cutting me out of his life piece by piece. And for a while it worked. For a while, I was the sad, lonely mother who'd been pushed aside. The inconvenient relic of Daniel's past. The woman who was too much and too needy and too involved. But then something changed in me. I stopped crying. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. And I started thinking, really thinking, about who Rebecca was, about what she was doing, about how to stop her, and more importantly, how to destroy her. Because she'd made this personal. She'd taken the most precious thing in my life and tried to erase me from it. And now I was going to make her pay. Slowly, carefully, completely. I started keeping records. Every text message. Every phone call. Every conversation. I documented everything. Dates. Times. What was said. What wasn't said. I created a file on my computer labeled Garden Plans, so no one would think twice about it. But inside that file was everything. Every piece of evidence of Rebecca's manipulation. Every lie she'd told. Every time she'd answered Daniel's phone and made excuses. Every time she'd spoken for him. Every time she'd isolated him from me, from his friends, from anyone who might make him question her. I also started doing research on Rebecca, her background, her past, her family, her previous relationships. And what I found was interesting. Very interesting. Rebecca had a pattern. This wasn't the first time she'd isolated a partner. This wasn't the first time she'd come between someone and their family. There were breadcrumbs, digital footprints, old social media posts from ex-boyfriends' mothers, comments on forums from women who dealt with daughters-in-law just like her. I reached out to some of them, carefully, quietly, and I learned that Rebecca's need for control came from deep insecurity, that she couldn't handle competition for Daniel's attention, that she saw me not as his mother but as a rival. And I learned that women like Rebecca, when exposed, crumble, because their power comes from working in shadows, from subtle manipulation that leaves no obvious evidence. But I was creating evidence. I was building a case, and when the time was right, I would present it. Not with anger, not with accusations, but with calm, undeniable truth. I also learned patience. Real patience. The kind that doesn't react immediately. The kind that waits for the perfect moment. The kind that lets your enemy think they've won, right up until the moment you reveal they've lost everything. And so I waited. I watched. I prepared. And I became someone new. Someone Rebecca would never see coming. Someone who would take back her son and destroy the woman who tried to steal him. Not because I was cruel, but because it was necessary. Because some people only understand consequences. And Rebecca was about to learn what it meant to cross a mother who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was small. A Tuesday evening in October. I called Daniel. The phone rang 4 times. Voicemail. I didn't think much of it then. But I should have. Because that was the beginning. That was Rebecca's opening move. I just didn't know I was in a game yet. I sent a text. Hi sweetheart, just checking in. Hope you're well. Love you, Mom. The reply came the next morning. Short. Cold. Sorry, Mom was busy. Talk soon. No love you back. No explanation. Just 5 words. And that's when I should have known. But I gave her the benefit of the doubt. I told myself Daniel was just busy. I told myself things were fine. I was wrong. A week later I called again. Rebecca answered. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. Like honey laced with poison. Hello. Oh, hi Rebecca. Is Daniel there? There was a pause. Just a fraction of a second. But in that pause I heard calculation. He's in the shower, Eleanor. Can I have him call you back? I said yes. I thanked her. I hung up. And I waited. Daniel didn't call back. Not that day. Not the next. Not ever. That's when I started documenting. I created a spreadsheet. Date. Time. Who answered. What was said. Whether Daniel called back. And a pattern emerged. A clear, undeniable pattern. Every time I called, Rebecca answered. Every single time. And Daniel never called back. Or if he did, it was days later, and the conversation was brief. Distant. Wrong. I started testing theories. Called at different times. Early morning. Late evening. Weekends. Weekdays. It didn't matter. Rebecca always answered. Always had an excuse. He's working. He's tired. He's busy. He'll call you later. But later never came. And I realized what she was doing. She'd taken control of his phone. Or convinced him to let her screen his calls. Or trained him to ignore me. Whatever the method, the result was the same. She was a gatekeeper. And I was locked out. But I'm smart. Smarter than Rebecca gave me credit for. So I tried something else. I called Daniel's work number. The direct line to his desk. A number Rebecca couldn't control. And he answered. Daniel Carter speaking. My heart leapt. Daniel. Honey, it's Mom. There was a pause. A long pause. Oh, hey Mom. His voice was strained, uncomfortable. I'm actually in a meeting. Can I call you back? I said of course. I hung up. And I knew she'd gotten to him. She'd convinced him that talking to me was a burden. That I was a problem. That he needed to distance himself. So I started gathering evidence. Real evidence. I set up a new email address. Something generic. concernneighbor2023@gmail.com. And I started reaching out to Daniel's friends. People I'd known for years. People who'd been to our house for dinners and birthday parties. I asked careful questions. How's Daniel doing? Do you see him much? How's married life treating him? And the responses were revealing. Mark told me he hadn't seen Daniel in months. He's always busy, Mark said. Or Rebecca has plans for them. Another friend, James, said Daniel had missed their weekly basketball games. He said Rebecca needed him home. A third friend, Lisa, said she'd invited them to a party and Rebecca had declined for both of them. She said Daniel was tired and didn't feel like socializing. The pattern was clear. Rebecca was isolating Daniel. From me. From his friends. From anyone who might tell him what she was really doing. And I documented all of it. Screenshots of text conversations. Forwarded emails. Written notes of phone calls. Everything went into my garden plans file. And my case grew stronger. Then I did something Rebecca would never expect. I befriended her mother, Charlotte. I ran into her at the grocery store. Completely by accident. Or so I made it seem. Charlotte. How lovely to see you. I was warm. Friendly. I suggested coffee. She agreed. And over coffee I played my role perfectly. The concerned mother-in-law. The woman who just wanted everyone to be happy. I feel like I hardly see Daniel and Rebecca anymore. I said, my voice tinged with just the right amount of sadness. I hope I haven't done anything to upset them. Charlotte was sympathetic. Oh, Eleanor, I'm sure it's not you. Rebecca's just very particular about her time. Particular. Interesting word choice. I probed gently. Has she always been that way? Charlotte hesitated. And in that hesitation I saw an opening. She's always been strong-willed, Charlotte admitted. Even as a child. She likes things her way. And she doesn't like sharing. I filed that away. We had coffee again the next week. And the week after that, Charlotte and I became friends. Or rather, she thought we were friends. Really, I was gathering intelligence. I learned that Rebecca had done this before. With her high school boyfriend. She'd cut him off from his family and friends. The relationship ended badly. With her college boyfriend too. He said she was controlling, Charlotte confided. But I thought she'd grown out of it. She hadn't. She'd just gotten better at hiding it. But I was getting better at exposing it. I started documenting Rebecca's behavior. The time she spoke for Daniel. The time she made decisions without consulting him. The time she subtly undermined his confidence. I couldn't witness these moments directly, but I could see the evidence. And how Daniel changed. How he became quieter. More withdrawn. Less sure of himself. I also started attending the same yoga class as Rebecca. Pure coincidence, of course. I was friendly. Pleasant. I never mentioned Daniel. I never mentioned our strained relationship. I just observed. And what I saw confirmed everything. Rebecca was a master manipulator. She was charming to the instructor. Sweet to the other students. But I saw the calculation behind it. The way she positioned herself as the victim when talking about her life. My mother-in-law is so demanding, she said once, not knowing I was in the bathroom stall. She calls constantly. It's exhausting. I recorded that conversation on my phone. Just the audio. And I saved it. Because I knew the time would come when I'd need it. When Daniel would need to hear it. When everyone would need to know the truth about who Rebecca really was. The months passed. Daniel stopped calling entirely. He stopped responding to most of my texts. When he did respond, it was brief. Impersonal. Like I was an obligation. A chore. And it hurt. God, it hurt. But I didn't let the pain stop me. I let it fuel me. Every ache. Every tear. Every lonely night. I channeled it all into my plan, into my documentation, into my preparation for the moment when I would reveal everything. Then came the Sunday lunches that stopped. I'd invited them over. Week after week, and week after week there was an excuse. Daniel's not feeling well. We have plans. Rebecca's busy. I documented every invitation, every excuse. I saved every text message, every email, building my case, proving the pattern. And then I made a mistake, or what seemed like a mistake. I showed up at their apartment unannounced with a lasagna, Daniel's favorite. I knocked on the door. Rebecca answered. She looked surprised, annoyed, but she hid it quickly behind that sweet smile. Eleanor, we weren't expecting you. I held up the lasagna. I made this for you both. She took it. She didn't invite me in. Daniel appeared behind her. He looked uncomfortable, guilty. Hey, Mom. He didn't hug me. He just stood there. Can I come in for a bit? I asked. They exchanged a look. We're actually about to head out, Rebecca lied. I could see Daniel was in sweatpants. The TV was on behind them. They were lying to my face. And I let them. I smiled. I said goodbye. I left. But I was smiling for a different reason. Because I brought a small recording device in my purse. Voice activated. And I'd left it running. I went home. I downloaded the audio. And I listened to what they said after I left. I can't believe she just showed up, Rebecca said. We need to set stricter boundaries. She's my mom, Daniel said weakly. She means well. She's suffocating you, Daniel. Suffocating us. You need to tell her to back off. And there it was. Rebecca, in her own words, pushing my son to cut me out. I saved that recording, backed it up in 3 different places. And I waited. Because I knew the time would come when Daniel would need to hear it. When he would need proof that I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't making things up. That Rebecca was exactly what I said she was. Then came the conversation with Mark at the grocery store. The one where he told me Daniel thought I was difficult. That Rebecca was helping him set boundaries. I acted shocked, hurt, but inside I was calculating. This was Rebecca's mistake. She'd overplayed her hand. She'd been too explicit. And now Daniel was repeating her words to his friends. That meant there was a crack. A small one. But cracks can be widened. I called Daniel that night. Rebecca answered. Of course she did. Is Daniel there? I really need to talk to him. He's resting. I ran into Mark today. He said Daniel thinks I'm being difficult. I just want to understand what I did wrong. There was a long silence. Then Rebecca spoke, her voice calm but filled with venom disguised as concern. Eleanor, I think you know. You've been overwhelming. Daniel loves you, but he needs space. We both do. You can't just show up unannounced. You can't call him every single day. It's too much. And then she said the words that sealed her fate. You need to let go. I let her think she'd won. I let her think I was defeated. I thanked her quietly. I hung up. And then I smiled. Because she'd just given me everything I needed. I'd recorded that call too. Her condescending tone. Her lies about me calling every single day when I had proof I hadn't. Her manipulation disguised as care. It was all there. Documented. Saved. Ready. A few days later Daniel called. His voice was cold. Mom, we need to talk. He told me I'd accused Rebecca of turning him against me. He said she'd been nothing but kind. He said they needed space. Don't call. Don't text. Don't visit. We'll reach out when we're ready. And then he hung up. I sat there, phone in hand. And I didn't cry. Not this time. Because this wasn't the end. This was exactly what I needed. This was Rebecca pushing too far. Isolating Daniel completely. And when someone is completely isolated, when they're trapped in a bubble with only one voice, eventually they start to question that voice. Eventually they start to miss the people they lost. And when that happened, I would be ready. With proof. With evidence. With truth. And Rebecca's carefully constructed world would shatter like glass. The months after Daniel cut me off were the hardest of my life. But they were also the most productive. Because while Daniel thought I was sitting at home crying, I was working, planning, building my case. And more importantly, I was making allies. Real allies. People who would help me when the time came to expose Rebecca for what she truly was. First, I strengthened my relationship with Charlotte, Rebecca's mother. We had coffee every week. I was the perfect friend. Sympathetic. Understanding. Never pushing. Never prying too hard. But always listening. And Charlotte, lonely and isolated herself, talked. She told me things. About Rebecca's childhood. About her need for control. About past relationships that had ended badly. She's always been jealous, Charlotte admitted one afternoon. Even as a little girl. She couldn't share her toys. She couldn't share her friends. Everything had to be hers alone. I filed that information away. And I kept being Charlotte's friend. Because I knew that when the time came, when Rebecca's true nature was finally revealed, Charlotte would be a witness. She would confirm what I'd suspected. That Rebecca's behavior with Daniel wasn't new. It was a pattern. A lifelong pattern of control and manipulation. Next, I reached out to Daniel's friends more systematically. Not as Eleanor, his mother, but as someone concerned. I created a private Facebook group called Friends of Daniel Carter Check-In. I invited Mark, James, Lisa, and a dozen others. The premise was simple. Daniel had become distant, and we all cared about him. Had anyone else noticed? Was anyone else worried? The responses flooded in. Everyone had noticed. Everyone was worried. Mark said Daniel had missed his bachelor party reunion. Lisa said Daniel had stopped responding to texts. James said Daniel had quit their weekly basketball games without explanation. And when I asked if anyone had met Rebecca or spent time with them as a couple, the stories were telling. She answers for him, Mark wrote. We invited them to dinner. And Rebecca said they were busy before Daniel could even respond. She's always redirecting conversations away from Daniel's past, Lisa added. Like she doesn't want him to remember life before her. I tried to plan a guy's weekend, James said. Rebecca said Daniel couldn't go because they had plans. But Daniel looked confused when she said it, like he didn't know about any plans. I screenshot every comment, every observation, every piece of evidence that Rebecca was isolating Daniel from everyone who cared about him. And I saved it all. But I didn't stop there. I did something Rebecca would never expect. I hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Chen, a quiet, professional man in his 50s who specialized in domestic cases. I told him everything. About Rebecca. About Daniel. About the isolation. I need proof, I said. I need evidence that holds up. Not just for me. For Daniel. So when he's ready to see the truth, I can show him something undeniable. Robert worked for 3 months. He was discreet, professional, thorough, and what he uncovered was damning. Rebecca had lied about her employment history. The marketing job she claimed to have? She'd been fired from it 2 years ago for creating a hostile work environment. She'd falsified her resume for her current job. She'd also been hiding debt. Significant debt. Credit cards maxed out. Daniel had become distant, and we all cared about him. Had anyone else noticed? Was anyone else worried? The responses flooded in. Everyone had noticed. Everyone was worried. Mark said Daniel had missed his bachelor party reunion. Lisa said Daniel had stopped responding to texts. James said Daniel had quit their weekly basketball games without explanation. And when I asked if anyone had met Rebecca or spent time with them as a couple, the stories were telling. She answers for him, Mark wrote. We invited them to dinner. And Rebecca said they were busy before Daniel could even respond. She's always redirecting conversations away from Daniel's past, Lisa added. Like she doesn't want him to remember life before her. I tried to plan a guy's weekend, James said. Rebecca said Daniel couldn't go because they had plans. But Daniel looked confused when she said it, like he didn't know about any plans. I screenshot every comment, every observation, every piece of evidence that Rebecca was isolating Daniel from everyone who cared about him. And I saved it all. But I didn't stop there. I did something Rebecca would never expect. I hired a private investigator. His name was Robert Chen, a quiet, professional man in his 50s who specialized in domestic cases. I told him everything. About Rebecca. About Daniel. About the isolation. I need proof, I said. I need evidence that holds up. Not just for me. For Daniel. So when he's ready to see the truth, I can show him something undeniable. Robert worked for 3 months. He was discreet, professional, thorough. And what he uncovered was damning. Rebecca had lied about her employment history. The marketing job she claimed to have? She'd been fired from it 2 years ago for creating a hostile work environment. She'd falsified her resume for her current job. She'd also been hiding debt. Significant debt. Credit cards maxed out. Student loans in default. She'd been using Daniel's income to pay her bills while telling him they were building savings together. But the most devastating discovery was this. Rebecca had been in contact with an ex-boyfriend. Regularly. For months. Texts. Calls. Late-night conversations. Robert documented it all. Screenshots. Call logs. Even photos of them meeting for coffee. They were friends, she told this ex. Just friends. But the text told a different story. I miss you, she'd written. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Daniel's nice, but he's not you. I paid Robert his fee. I thanked him. And I added his report to my file. My case was complete. I had everything. Rebecca's manipulation. Her isolation tactics. Her lies. Her financial deception. Her emotional affair. Everything Daniel needed to see the truth. Everything he needed to understand that the woman he'd married, the woman who'd convinced him to cut me out, was not who she pretended to be. But I didn't act immediately. Because timing is everything. I needed Daniel to be ready to hear the truth. I needed him to be questioning Rebecca on his own. And so I waited. I watched from a distance. And I saw the cracks forming. Through Charlotte, I learned that Daniel and Rebecca were fighting. Rebecca says it's stress from work, Charlotte told me. But I hear it in her voice. Something's wrong. Through the Facebook group, I learned that Daniel had reached out to Mark. He called me out of the blue, Mark posted. Asked if we could grab coffee. He sounded tired. Sad maybe. We're meeting next week. The cracks were widening. Rebecca's control was slipping. And I knew it was almost time. But I needed one more piece. I needed Daniel to see Rebecca's manipulation for himself, to experience it firsthand in a way he couldn't deny. And that's when I made my move. I sent Daniel a letter. Not an email he might not see. Not a text Rebecca could intercept. But a physical letter. Mailed to his office. Addressed to Daniel Carter, personal and confidential. I kept it brief. Emotional but not desperate. My dear Daniel, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you even want to hear from me. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. And I miss you every single day. Whatever I did to hurt you, to push you away, I'm sorry. I would give anything to understand what went wrong between us. You don't have to respond. You don't have to do anything. I just needed you to know that my door is always open. That my love is always here. That I'm still your mother, and I always will be. Love, Mom. I mailed it on a Monday, and then I waited. I didn't know if Daniel would read it. I didn't know if Rebecca would find it first. But I'd taken a calculated risk. Because if Rebecca found it, she would overreact. She would push too hard. And that would be her downfall. And if Daniel read it, it would plant a seed. A reminder of what he'd lost. Of what Rebecca had cost him. For days later, Charlotte called me. Eleanor, something's happened. My heart raced. What is it? Rebecca and Daniel had a huge fight. The worst one yet. I could hear it through the walls. Rebecca was screaming. Something about Daniel's mother. Something about boundaries. I asked what Daniel said. He was defending you, Charlotte said quietly. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard him say, she's my mother. I can't just pretend she doesn't exist. The seed had sprouted. Daniel had read my letter. And it had worked. He was questioning Rebecca. Finally, after months of isolation, after months of lies, he was starting to see through her. And that's when Rebecca made her fatal mistake. She issued an ultimatum. Through Charlotte, through the Facebook group, through my network of information, I learned what happened. Rebecca told Daniel he had to choose. Her or me. If you contact your mother, she said, I'm leaving you. I can't be in a marriage where I'm competing with her. It was classic manipulation. Creating a false choice. Making Daniel believe he couldn't have both. But ultimatums are dangerous, because they can backfire. And this one did. Daniel didn't respond to Rebecca the way she expected. He didn't immediately agree. He didn't apologize. Instead, he went quiet, withdrawn. He started thinking, really thinking, about what his life had become, about who he'd lost, about whether Rebecca's love was supposed to feel this controlling, this suffocating, this conditional. And that's when I made my final move. I didn't reach out to Daniel directly. That would have pushed him back to Rebecca. Instead, I reached out to Mark. Through the Facebook group, I sent him a message. Mark, I know Daniel's been struggling. I know he and Rebecca are having problems. I don't want to interfere. But I have some information I think Daniel needs to see. Information about Rebecca. About who she really is. Can you help me? Mark agreed. We met at a coffee shop. I brought copies of everything. The recordings of Rebecca speaking badly about me. The evidence of her isolation tactics. The private investigator's report. The proof of her lies. Her debt. Her emotional affair. I showed Mark everything. His face grew darker with every page. This is... He couldn't finish. This is who Daniel married. I nodded. And he has no idea. She's convinced him that I'm the problem. That his friends are the problem. That everyone except her is the problem. Mark took a copy of everything. I'll give this to Daniel, he promised. He needs to know the truth. I asked him to wait for the right moment. When Daniel was already questioning Rebecca. When his defenses were down. Don't present it as an attack, I advised. Present it as concern. As proof that his instincts are right. Mark understood. He was a good friend. The kind of friend Daniel needed. The kind Rebecca had tried to erase. 2 weeks later it happened. Mark and Daniel met for coffee. And Mark showed Daniel everything. Every piece of evidence. Every recording. Every document. Every lie. I wasn't there, but Mark told me what happened later. Daniel sat in silence for a long time. Reading. Listening. Processing. His hands shook. His face went pale. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know she was. I didn't know. Mark put a hand on his shoulder. Your mom loves you, Dan. She always has. And Rebecca. Rebecca's been lying to you. About everything. Daniel went home that night. He confronted Rebecca. And she denied everything. She called me a liar. She called the private investigator's report fabricated. She said Mark was trying to break them up. She played the victim. She cried. She pleaded. But Daniel had seen the evidence. He'd heard her own words recorded. He'd seen the texts to her ex. He'd seen the debt she'd hidden. And for the first time he saw through her. I need time, he told her. I need space. I need to think. And Rebecca panicked. Because space meant Daniel might talk to other people. Might talk to me. Might realize how much she'd manipulated him. So she made one last desperate play. She threatened suicide. If you leave me, she said, I don't know what I'll do. I can't live without you. But Daniel had learned something from the evidence I'd provided. Rebecca had made this same threat before. To a previous boyfriend. It was in the private investigator's report. An interview with an ex who described the exact same manipulation. The exact same threat. And it had been a lie then too. Daniel called Rebecca's bluff. He called her mother. He told Charlotte what Rebecca had said. And then he packed a bag. And he left. Rebecca's world started crumbling the moment Daniel walked out that door. But I wasn't satisfied with just that. I wanted her to face consequences. Real consequences. For everything she'd done. Not just to me. Not just to Daniel. But to everyone she'd manipulated over the years. Because people like Rebecca don't change unless they're forced to. Unless they face the full weight of their actions. The first domino fell quickly. Daniel called me. For the first time in over a year. His voice was broken. Shaking. Mom. Daniel. I let the silence sit for a moment. Let him feel the weight of what he'd done. What he'd lost. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. About everything. About you. About Rebecca. About all of it. I didn't rush to comfort him. Not yet. Because Daniel needed to understand. really understand. Tell me what happened, I said calmly. And he did. He told me everything. About the fight. About seeing the evidence. About confronting Rebecca. About her lies and denials. About her final desperate manipulation. She threatened to hurt herself, he said, his voice thick with tears. But I read the report. I know she's done this before. I know it's just another way to control me. Where are you now? I asked. A hotel. I left. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't look at her. I took a breath. Daniel, I want you to come home. But not yet. Not until you understand everything. Not until you're ready to hear the whole truth. Because there's more. More than what Mark showed you. His voice cracked. What do you mean? Come to my house tomorrow. Bring Mark if you want. Bring whoever you need for support. And I'll show you everything. Every lie. Every manipulation. Every moment of the past 2 years. And then you'll understand exactly what Rebecca is. And what she did to us. We met the next day. Daniel came alone. He looked terrible. Exhausted. Thinner. Older. Like he'd aged 5 years in one night. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Rebecca had once smiled at me over lunch, pretending to be the daughter I never had. And I opened my laptop. I showed Daniel everything. The spreadsheet of phone calls and blocked conversations. The recordings of Rebecca talking about me behind my back. The evidence of isolation tactics. The screenshots from his friends about how Rebecca had cut them out. The financial records showing her hidden debt. The text to her ex-boyfriend. The private investigator's full report, including interviews with her previous boyfriends and their families. All of them telling the same story. Rebecca was a serial manipulator. A controller. A woman who couldn't share. Who couldn't allow the people she dated to have lives outside of her. Daniel sat in silence. Reading. Listening. Watching. His hands trembled. Tears rolled down his face. I let her take you from me, he finally said. I let her convince me that you were the problem. That you were overbearing and needy and difficult. And the whole time it was her. She was the one who was all of those things. She projected it onto you. And I believed her. I believed her over you. Over my own mother. Yes, I said simply. You did. I didn't soften it. I didn't make it easier. Because he needed to feel the full weight of his choices. He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen. Can you ever forgive me? I took a sip of tea. I let him wait. And then I said, Daniel, I never stopped loving you. But forgiveness? That will take time. Because what Rebecca did to me was terrible. But what you did, choosing to believe her lies, cutting me out of your life, that hurt more than anything she could have done alone. So yes, I can forgive you. But not today. Not until you prove that you've learned from this. That you'll never let anyone come between us again. He nodded. He understood. And then he asked the question I'd been waiting for. What do we do now? About Rebecca. I smiled. A slow, calculated smile. Now, Daniel, we make sure she faces consequences. Real consequences. For everything she's done. The plan was simple. Methodical. Devastating. First, we exposed Rebecca's lies to her family. I invited Charlotte over. Daniel was there. He documented every hidden debt, every lie about finances. The lawyer advised him on how to protect his assets, his credit, his future. Rebecca would get nothing. No alimony. No settlement. She'd have to face the debt she'd created alone. But the most devastating blow came from something I hadn't planned. Something that happened organically. One of Rebecca's ex-boyfriends, seeing Daniel's post in the friend group, reached out. His name was Tyler. He dated Rebecca 3 years ago. And he'd gone through the exact same thing. The isolation. The manipulation. The lies. He tried to warn Daniel once, early in Daniel's relationship with Rebecca. But Rebecca had convinced Daniel that Tyler was just jealous. That he was lying. That he couldn't handle that she'd moved on. Tyler shared his story publicly. In a blog post. He didn't use Rebecca's name. But anyone who knew her would recognize the details. He described the relationship. The red flags. The control. The way she'd cut him off from his family and friends. The way she'd lied about her past. The way she threatened suicide when he tried to leave. And he ended with a warning. If you're in a relationship with someone who isolates you from everyone you love, who makes you question your own reality, who has a different story for every person they talk to, get out. Get help. And don't look back. The post went viral in our community. Thousands of people read it, shared it, commented on it, and Rebecca couldn't hide anymore. She couldn't deny it, because too many people recognized the patterns. Too many people had similar stories. She'd been exposed. Completely. Publicly. Irrevocably. Rebecca tried to fight back. She called Daniel. Left voicemails. Sent texts. Hundreds of them. Begging. Pleading. Threatening. Accusing. You turned everyone against me. Your mother poisoned you. You're a coward. I loved you and this is how you repay me. But Daniel blocked her. Changed his number. Because you could have had a family. You could have had a mother-in-law who loved you, who supported you, who welcomed you. But you chose control over connection. You chose manipulation over love. And now you have nothing. I didn't destroy you, Rebecca. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see what you really are. Consider this a lesson. When you try to erase someone's mother, when you try to sever bonds built over decades, when you think your whispers are more powerful than truth, you will lose. Every single time. I hope your next relationship, if you ever have one, teaches you to be better. But I doubt it will. Because people like you rarely change. You're too busy being the victim to ever see yourself as the villain. Goodbye, Rebecca. I'd say I hope we never meet again, but we both know that's already guaranteed. You're out of our lives. Forever. And you did that to yourself. Enjoy the consequences. I mailed it. And I never heard from her again. 6 months after Daniel left Rebecca, our lives had changed dramatically. Daniel moved back in with me temporarily while he rebuilt his life. It wasn't easy. We had to learn to trust each other again. We had to establish new boundaries, healthy ones, not the toxic ones Rebecca had imposed. We went to therapy together, family counseling, where we talked about what happened, about his mistakes, about my pain, about how we'd rebuild what was broken. I should have known, Daniel said in one session. There were so many red flags. But every time I noticed something wrong, she'd explain it away. She'd make me feel guilty for questioning her. She'd say I was being paranoid, or that I was letting you poison my mind against her. The therapist, Dr. Morrison, nodded. That's called gaslighting. She made you doubt your own perceptions, your own reality. It's a powerful manipulation tactic. I spoke up. I should have acted sooner. I should have confronted it directly instead of waiting and planning. Dr. Morrison shook her head. Eleanor, if you'd confronted it directly, Daniel might not have been ready to hear it. He might have pushed you away even more. Sometimes the only way to expose a manipulator is to let them reveal themselves. Which is exactly what happened. Slowly, week by week, session by session, Daniel and I healed. He apologized. Genuinely. Repeatedly. Not just with words but with actions. He showed up. He called when he said he would. He included me in his life again. He introduced me to his new friends from work. He brought me to office parties. He made sure I knew I was important to him. And I forgave him. Really forgave him. Because I saw that he'd learned. That he'd grown. That he understood what he'd lost and why he'd never let it happen again. Our relationship wasn't exactly like it was before. It couldn't be. We'd both been changed by what happened. But in some ways it was stronger. Built on honesty. On hard lessons learned. On the understanding that relationships require constant effort and awareness. Daniel's divorce was finalized 8 months after he left Rebecca. She tried to fight it. Tried to claim she deserved alimony. Tried to claim emotional distress. But the evidence was overwhelming. The fraud. The lies. The manipulation. The emotional affair. The judge saw through her act immediately. Denied her claims. Granted Daniel an expedited divorce. And ordered her to pay her own legal fees. Rebecca tried to rebuild her image. She moved to another city. Got a new job, though not in marketing anymore. She couldn't with her history. She worked retail. She tried online dating. But her reputation followed her. Tyler's blog post was still out there. Screenshots of her social media meltdowns still circulated. People she dated would Google her name and find the truth. Relationships ended before they really began. I heard through Charlotte that Rebecca was in therapy. Finally. Court-ordered, after the restraining order incident. Whether it would help, I didn't know. Whether she would actually change, I doubted. But at least she was facing consequences. At least she couldn't hurt anyone else the way she'd hurt Daniel. At least not easily. Meanwhile, Daniel started dating again. Carefully. Slowly. He was cautious now. Aware of red flags. He brought potential partners to meet me early on. Not for my approval, but for another perspective. "What do you think, Mom?" he'd ask after introducing me to someone new. And I'd give honest feedback. Not controlling. Not overbearing. Just honest. "She seems kind. She listens when you talk. She didn't try to speak for you or control the conversation. Or sometimes, she interrupted you a lot. She seemed dismissive of your interests. She reminded me of Rebecca in this specific way." Daniel listened. He appreciated the input. And eventually, about a year after the divorce was finalized, he met someone. Her name was Sophie. A teacher. Kind. Genuine. Down to earth. She had her own life. Her own friends. Her own family she was close to. She didn't try to isolate Daniel. She encouraged his friendships. She suggested we have regular Sunday dinners together, the three of us. She asked about family traditions and wanted to participate in them. The first time Sophie came for Sunday lunch, I was nervous. Not because I didn't like her, but because I was afraid. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of losing Daniel again. Afraid that this was all too good to be true. But Sophie proved herself. Week after week. Month after month. She was consistent. Honest. Open. She didn't play games. She didn't manipulate. She was just good. A genuinely good person who loved my son and respected his relationships. One afternoon, Sophie and I were in the kitchen together, preparing lunch while Daniel was in the living room watching football. She turned to me and said, "Eleanor, I want you to know something. I know what happened with Rebecca. Daniel told me everything. And I want you to know that I would never do that. I would never try to come between you and Daniel. Mothers are important. Family is important. And I'm grateful you're willing to welcome me after everything you've been through." I stopped chopping vegetables. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And I saw sincerity. "Thank you, Sophie. That means more than you know." She smiled. "Daniel's lucky to have you. And if he and I have a future together, I hope I can be lucky enough to have you too. Not as a replacement for my own mom, but as someone else who cares about him, who wants the best for him. We should be on the same team, not competing." I hugged her. Right there in my kitchen. And I realized that this was what it should have been like with Rebecca. This openness. This honesty. This respect. Rebecca had been wrong from the start. And now finally Daniel had found someone right. 2 years after Rebecca left our lives, Daniel proposed to Sophie. He asked for my blessing first. Not because he needed it, but because he wanted it. Because he valued my opinion. Because he'd learned that including family, not excluding them, made relationships stronger. I gave my blessing enthusiastically. The wedding was beautiful. Small. Intimate. Everything Rebecca's wedding had pretended to be but wasn't. Sophie's family was there. Warm and welcoming. They treated Daniel like he'd always been part of their family. They included me in photos. In conversations. In celebrations. I stood next to Sophie's mother during the ceremony. And when Daniel and Sophie exchanged vows, I cried. But this time they were tears of joy. Real joy. Not the uncertain, worried tears I'd cried at his first wedding. These were tears of relief. Of happiness. Of knowing that my son had finally found the right person. At the reception, Daniel gave a speech. He thanked Sophie. He thanked her family. And then he turned to me. "I want to thank my mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for never giving up on me. Even when I gave up on her. Even when I made the worst mistake of my life and pushed her away. She waited. She loved me. And she fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Mom, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me. How sorry I am. And how grateful I am that you never stopped being my mother. Even when I stopped being your son." The room was silent. People dabbed at their eyes. And I stood up, walked to Daniel, hugged him. "You were always my son," I whispered. "Always. No matter what." And in that moment I knew we'd won. Not just against Rebecca, but against everything she represented. The manipulation, the lies, the attempts to destroy our family. We'd survived. We'd rebuilt. And we were stronger than ever. As for Rebecca, I heard one final update about a year after Daniel's wedding to Sophie. Charlotte called me. We'd remained friends, bonded by our shared experience of Rebecca's manipulation. "Eleanor, I thought you should know. Rebecca's engaged." I felt a flash of concern. To whom? A man she met online. He lives in another state. She's moving there next month. I asked if he knew about her past. Charlotte sighed. I tried to tell him. I sent him a message on Facebook. Explained what happened with Daniel. Warned him. He blocked me. Rebecca told him I was crazy. That I was trying to ruin her happiness. I closed my eyes. "Then there's nothing more we can do." Charlotte agreed. "I know. But I had to try. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to warn him." I understood. We'd done what we could. Rebecca's new victim would have to learn the hard way, just like Daniel had. Or maybe, just maybe, the therapy had worked. Maybe Rebecca had changed. But I doubted it. People like her rarely did. I chose not to think about Rebecca anymore after that. She'd taken enough of my time. Enough of my energy. Enough of my tears. I focused instead on my life. On my relationship with Daniel. On my friendship with Sophie. On being the grandmother I hoped to be someday when they decided to have children. I focused on the book club I joined. The painting classes I took. The volunteer work I did at the food bank. I built a full, rich life. One that didn't revolve around my son but included him in healthy, balanced ways. And every Sunday we had dinner together. Me, Daniel, and Sophie. Sometimes Sophie's parents joined us. Sometimes Daniel's friends came over. Our home was full of laughter. Of love. Of the kind of family warmth that Rebecca had tried so hard to destroy. But she'd failed. We'd won. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. 5 years have passed since Rebecca left our lives. 5 years of healing. Of rebuilding. Of learning. And now, as I sit in my kitchen watching Daniel and Sophie play with their 1-year-old daughter, my granddaughter Emma, I can finally say I'm at peace. Not because Rebecca got what she deserved, though she did. But because we survived. We healed. And we're stronger because of it. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled the situation. If I think I went too far. If exposing Rebecca so thoroughly was too much. And my answer is always the same: no. I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because Rebecca didn't just hurt me. She didn't just manipulate Daniel. She was a pattern. A serial manipulator who would have continued hurting people if someone didn't stop her. If someone didn't expose her. I did what needed to be done. I documented. I gathered evidence. I waited for the right moment. And then I revealed the truth. All of it. Not with violence. Not with cruelty for its own sake. But with cold, hard facts. With recordings and screenshots and investigator reports and testimonies from people she'd hurt. With truth. And truth, when wielded correctly, is the most powerful weapon in the world. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Would I do it differently? Maybe. I might have acted sooner in some ways. But the waiting, the planning, the patience, those were necessary. Because if I'd acted too soon, Daniel wouldn't have been ready to hear the truth. He needed to see Rebecca's manipulation for himself. He needed to experience the isolation, the control, the cracks in her facade. Only then could he truly understand what I've been trying to tell him all along. I've learned a lot through this experience. I've learned that love sometimes means fighting, not just forgiving. That protecting someone you love might require uncomfortable actions. That standing up to manipulators requires strategy, not just emotion. I've learned that patience is powerful. That documentation is crucial. That allies matter. And that sometimes the only way to defeat someone who operates in shadows is to drag everything into the light. I've also learned about myself. I learned I'm stronger than I thought. More strategic. More capable. I learned that I can endure loneliness and pain and heartbreak without breaking completely. I learned that a mother's love, when pushed to its limits, becomes something fierce, something unstoppable, something that will move mountains, gather evidence, wait years if necessary, all to protect her child. But I also learned mercy. Not for Rebecca, she earned her consequences, but mercy in how I treated Daniel as he healed. How I forgave him without holding his mistakes over his head forever. How I welcomed Sophie without making her pay for Rebecca's sins. How I chose to focus on rebuilding rather than wallowing in bitterness. If you're listening to this story and you're in a similar situation, if someone is manipulating your child, your spouse, your loved one, I want you to know something. You're not powerless. You're not crazy. Your instincts are probably right, and you can fight back. But do it smart. Document everything. Build your case. Find allies. Wait for the right moment. And when you act decisively. Expose the truth completely. Don't leave room for doubt. Don't leave opportunities for the manipulator to twist the narrative. But also know when to stop. Know when you've done enough. Know when to let go and focus on healing. Because revenge, if it consumes you, becomes its own kind of poison. I exposed Rebecca. I made sure she faced consequences. I protected Daniel and warned others. And then I stopped. I moved on. I focused on rebuilding. On living. On joy. Because that's the final victory. Not just defeating your enemy, but thriving after the battle is over. My son is happy now. Truly happy. With a woman who loves him without controlling him. With a mother he's close to again. With a daughter who will grow up knowing her grandmother's love. Rebecca tried to steal that future from us. She almost succeeded. But in the end she failed. And we won. Not because we were cruel, but because we refused to give up. Because truth is stronger than lies. Because love, real love, outlasts manipulation. My name is Eleanor Carter. I'm 67 years old now. And this is my story. The story of how my daughter-in-law tried to erase me. How I fought back. How I exposed her. And how, in the end, love and truth won. Always remember, a mother's love is powerful. But a mother's love combined with patience, strategy, and determination, that's unstoppable. That's what defeated Rebecca. And that's what saved my family. Never underestimate a mother who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for.